The Serapis Cipher, in the Shadow of John the Baptist, Episode 1. The Desert Revelation. The gritty heat of the Judean desert hung in the air as Dr. Miriam Levy squinted at the horizon, her leather satchel bouncing at her side. She had been here many times before, led by rumors, manuscripts, or half-legible citations that beckoned her to the cradle of history. But something felt different this time. There was an air of weighted anticipation that not even the desert sun could chase away. Somewhere behind her trudged Father Benedict Franco, his white clerical collar loose and dusty. He had known Dr. Levy for years, though their paths converged only on special occasions when biblical mysteries intersected with modern urgencies. Officially, he was a Vatican envoy, a priest deeply versed in church history, but Miriam had discovered over time that he was far more than a mere emissary. His knowledge of apocryphal texts, hidden archives, and the hush-hush corridors of ecclesiastical power ran disturbingly deep. They arrived at a rocky outcrop pockmarked with caves. A group of local Bedouins waited there, eyes filled with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Miriam approached slowly, rummaging in her satchel for a canteen of water as a peace offering. The men nodded and accepted her hospitality. After an exchange of pleasantries in Arabic, she gleaned that a remarkable discovery had been made in the narrower chamber of a nearby cave. One of their young herders had stumbled upon an ancient-looking parchment hidden in a nook behind some collapsed stones. Father Benedict followed, careful to keep a respectful distance and rely on Miriam's skillful bridging of cultures. When they finally ducked inside the cave, the temperature plummeted. The flicker of their flashlights illuminated dust motes dancing in the still, hushed air. On a makeshift table of stacked stones lay a parchment sealed in plastic sheeting for protection. Miriam's heart thudded in her chest when she saw it. Even through the plastic, the texture of the papyrus was unmistakable. It looked as ancient as the Dead Sea Scrolls, yet it bore a script different from the typical Hebrew or Aramaic. Greek letters, scrawled in a careful but hurried hand. Father Benedict murmured a quick prayer under his breath and moved closer, gingerly lifting the parchment from the table with gloved hands. Miriam produced a portable magnifier. She inhaled sharply when her eyes focused on the faint letters. They were Greek, indeed, Koine Greek, from the look of it. Fragmentary words jumped out at her. Ioannes, John, Jesus, Jesus, Dikaios, righteous, eschatos, last days. But as she carefully scanned further lines, she encountered phrases that made her eyes widen, references to John feeling betrayed and abandoned by Jesus. She glanced at Father Benedict to see if he, too, had recognized the significance. He let out a tight breath. "Miriam," he said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "If this is genuine, then we have something that's going to ignite a theological firestorm." Miriam nodded, words stuck in her throat. She was already envisioning the academic feeding frenzy. On the surface, it hinted at a text claiming to document the split between John the Baptist and Jesus. Scholars had long debated the relationship between these two towering figures in early Christianity. A text that suggested John felt betrayed, with some of his followers believing he was the true Messiah, well, it would challenge mainstream Christian tradition profoundly. It would question everything from the Gospel's portrayal of John's role to the nature of Jesus' ministry itself. They stepped outside into the blazing desert sun, hearts racing. Miriam turned to the group of Bedouins to arrange for the safe retrieval of the parchment. She could feel the tension from Father Benedict. The Catholic Church would want to examine this artifact in a secure environment, but academia would demand transparency. In past incidents, he had always tried to straddle both worlds with fairness, but Miriam knew how these finds often disappeared into hidden vaults. That evening, they retreated to a small research outpost. Within these modest walls, filled with dusty shelves of reference books, battered chairs, and a single generator that powered a flickering overhead light, Miriam and Benedict laid out the parchment for preliminary examination. "All I know," she said softly, as they both gazed at the text, "is that this is going to change lives if it's real." He nodded. But if it's a forgery, it's a masterful one. And with new technologies, we have to be absolutely certain. They began their meticulous inspection. Miriam read small portions aloud. Ioannes did speak of the one coming after him who was to be mightier. But he took offense at the signs, saying, "If the Spirit was to rest upon me, why is this man forging a new path?" And many of Ioannes' own did call him the Christ, spurning the man from Nazareth. This isn't just some casual sectarian note, Father Benedict observed. It's a direct challenge to the orthodox view that John was merely the forerunner, humbly preparing the way. This text suggests John believed himself to be the rightful Messiah. Miriam set down her magnifier and pressed her palms against her temples. Yes, but we must confirm the dating. If the parchment can be reliably dated to the 1st or 2nd century, this is monumental. The big question is the authenticity. She paused, lips pursed. We'll start with carbon dating. I'll send a sample to the labs in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, we can do textual analysis, cross-referencing with known texts from the Qumran region. Father Benedict agreed. I'll contact the church's historical commission. They'll want a voice in this. Let's keep the location quiet for now. We don't want a stampede of treasure hunters. Soon after, they settled into their respective rooms for the night, neither able to sleep. Miriam scrolled through her notes, eyes darting to the swirling question, could this be a 21st century forgery, possibly crafted using advanced technology? It wasn't unheard of. There had been whispered rumors of unscrupulous individuals using AI text generation to create plausible ancient documents, even replicating period-accurate grammar and script, but forging a physical parchment with the right chemical composition. That required an entirely different level of sophistication. She flicked off her lamp. The darkness of the desert pressed against the window. Tomorrow would bring more revelations and, she sensed, more danger. In a corner room, Father Benedict prayed, his heart troubled. He recognized the swirl of forces that might latch onto such a discovery. Radical sects, modern Gnostic movements, even technology-driven disruptors who despised the power structures of Orthodox Christianity. In the hush of midnight, he mulled over an old rumor, a secret society determined to unravel the Church's influence by seeding doubt. They believed Paul's theology had derailed the original message, and they had the resources, money, technology, and cunning to produce forgeries that could shake the foundation of believers worldwide. The question burning in Benedict's mind was, were these men behind the new scroll? Morning arrived with a hot wind that kicked dust into the sky. Miriam was already at work, carefully photographing the parchment. Father Benedict joined her just as her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. I have a friend in Tel Aviv, an expert in paleography, she explained. He says he can do a preliminary scan if I send him some high-resolution images. He nodded, scanning the horizon out the window. Do it. The quicker we get multiple opinions, the better. Miriam's phone buzzed again, and she frowned deeper. A message from an unknown number popped up. We know what you found. The world will soon learn the truth about John's betrayal. Her breath caught in her throat. Father Benedict, noticing her pale expression, leaned over. She showed him the message. His jaw tightened. Don't reply, he said. They're watching. This suggests outside parties already know about the parchment. Possibly the Gnostic group I've heard rumors about. The Circle of Serapis. They've been trying for years to undermine official church narratives, or it could be a simple opportunist. Either way, we must proceed carefully. He was right. Miriam's pulse pounded with the reality. Their find was out in the open. Danger loomed. She swallowed, forced herself to appear calm, and returned to her tasks. There was no turning back now. The day wore on with slow, methodical work, photographing, measuring, analyzing the ink's color under various types of light. The writing style seemed consistent with first-century Koine Greek. The vocabulary had curious overlaps with the style found in the Gospel of John. Ironically enough, though they were discussing John the Baptist, the text's literary style contained certain Johannine echoes. Were these coincidences, or an intentional forgery. Father Benedict curated each finding with the discipline of a historian, but the anxiety of a man who anticipated ecclesiastical upheaval. Every time he found a phrase that contradicted canonical tradition, something about John's followers dismissing Jesus as the fisherman's son, or a mere disciple of the baptizer, it was as if a new wave of tension rolled over him. He silently prayed for guidance. How should the Church handle such a text if it were proven authentic? Early that evening, a battered jeep rattled up to the outpost. Out hopped Dr. Rashid Aboud, a local archaeologist Miriam had collaborated with in the past. He trotted in, his boots caked with dust, eyes bright. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, greeting them warmly. "Heard rumors from the Bedouin camps that you uncovered something bigger than the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves." Miriam and Father Benedict exchanged glances, uncertain of how to respond. They had tried to keep the find secret, but word traveled swiftly in this desert. The hush-hush approach was naive. Nothing stayed hidden for long in the world of biblical archaeology. She motioned for Dr. Aboud to follow, leading him to the table where the parchment lay, protected in a climate-controlled box. His eyes widened as he read the lines. Like Miriam, he recognized the explosive potential. For half an hour, the three huddled over the text, exchanging hushed commentary. Finally, Dr. Aboud exhaled. "You realize, if this is authentic, we'll see a schism in scholarship. Traditionalists will do everything to question its veracity. Many progressives will hail it as a suppressed truth about early Christianity. And the general public—" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, it'll be chaos." Miriam tapped her foot, clearly unsettled. "I'm sending a fragment for carbon dating. We'll have at least preliminary results within a week, but we need more immediate forensic tests." Dr. Aboud nodded. "Jerusalem has some labs that can do advanced spectroscopy on the ink. That might confirm if the materials align with antiquity or if they're modern." Father Benedict cut in. "We must ensure the chain of custody is secure. I've seen forgeries slip through the cracks before because someone tampered with the evidence en route. If this parchment is real, we have to guard it carefully." Aboud agreed. They made arrangements for a courier trusted by both the Israeli Antiquities Authority and the Catholic Church to handle the sample. Tension weighted the air. By the time darkness fell, the outpost was unusually crowded. A few more local archaeologists had arrived to see if the rumors were true. Most were turned away by Dr. Aboud's staff. The hush they tried to maintain was fraying. In hushed tones, Father Benedict and Miriam debated whether they should move the parchment to a more secure location. But as they concluded the day's work, the feeling of being watched returned. Miriam's phone buzzed again with a cryptic message. "The next scroll is ours." She shivered. Was there another scroll? Possibly these unknown adversaries meant the next part of the parchment, or they were referencing an entire new wave of revelations poised to appear. Could they be forging more texts to sow confusion? The possibilities made her stomach knot. That night, she and Father Benedict secured the parchment in a locking steel cabinet. They posted a local guard. Then they retreated to their rooms, where each struggled to rest. The dryness of the desert wind banged a loose shutter, casting ghostly echoes. At some point, Miriam drifted off, only to be awakened by a flurry of images. John the Baptist's piercing eyes, Jesus turning away. She awoke with her heart pounding, uncertain if it had been dream or omen. Morning brought more visitors and more questions. Dr. Aboud decided to remain, helping them pass the text line by line with fresh eyes. One passage drew their shared concern. "And Ioannes did call upon the children of light to keep the secret, that he had been anointed from birth. Yet the man from Nazareth, cunning in speech, lured away many. Ioannes, troubled, said, 'He steals my rightful place. This is not the way ordained from on high.' But some murmured that the Nazorian was truly the one, despite Ioannes' claims. The connotations were explosive. If John indeed declared himself anointed, the Messiah, then the entire bedrock of early Christian tradition about John's role was challenged. For centuries, the faithful had believed John recognized Jesus as the Lamb of God, even baptizing him in the Jordan. This text inverted that narrative dramatically. Even if it's a forgery, Father Benedict whispered, the person who wrote it understood just how to upend mainstream Christian teaching. Miriam nodded absently, her mind spinning. She considered again the possibility of artificial intelligence forging a text. Modern neural networks trained on thousands of ancient Greek manuscripts could, in theory, produce something that matched style and vocabulary. But forging the physical parchment itself required real ancient papyrus or a convincing replica aged with chemical processes. Such a hoax would be extraordinarily difficult and expensive, and for what? To disrupt Christianity? To make a name? Or to push a Gnostic agenda? She remembered reading about a secret group that believed Paul's theology hijacked Jesus' original message, making the religion more hierarchical, more institutional. They believed that originally Christianity was mystical, perhaps even leaning Gnostic. Could these conspirators be behind this? After breakfast, they set up a digital workstation. Miriam typed up her notes, scanning each Greek phrase. She used a specialized language model, an offline tool adapted for biblical texts, to check for stylistic anachronisms. Preliminary results indicated an authentic first-century feel, but the margin of error was significant. AI could replicate this too if it had large enough training data. Meanwhile, Father Benedict contacted the Vatican using a secure channel. She overheard snatches of his conversation. He carefully described the find, the possible implications, and the immediate need for scientific verification. She heard him mention his concern about the circle, presumably the Gnostic group. After he ended the call, he looked more worried than ever. "They're sending an envoy," he told Miriam. "Someone from the Pontifical Commission for Historical Research. Could be here in a few days." She met his gaze. "Let's hope they don't try to bury this, or twist the data." He said nothing, but the concern in his eyes was enough. Tensions ran high over the next few days. The lab in Jerusalem confirmed receipt of the sample and promised expedited results. Miriam continued to cross-check the text, while Father Benedict corresponded with church officials. Dr. Aboud tried to calm everyone's nerves with the repeated refrain, "Data first. Let's see what the science tells us." But the biggest surprise came late one afternoon. Miriam was in the midst of photographing the parchment again when Father Benedict walked in, stone-faced. He held his phone, the screen open to an email. "There's a new rumor online," he said slowly, "about a second parchment discovered near Ein Gedi. Supposedly it reveals even more inflammatory claims, that Jesus was actually taught secret knowledge by John, but twisted that knowledge for his own ends." Miriam blinked. "Where did you hear this?" "An archaeological forum, but the post was made under an anonymous handle. The user claims to have leaked text from the second parchment. I cross-referenced it with older Gnostic writings, and the parallels are uncanny." She stared at him, heart thrumming. This must be part of the same plot. Someone wants to sow chaos, either by forging multiple documents or by slowly releasing genuine fragments. If a second parchment is real, it might corroborate or conflict with this one. But we don't have any evidence it even exists. "And yet," Father Benedict said grimly, "the rumor itself could cause damage. People will flock here, hoping to find that second scroll. That means more eyes, more potential sabotage." Dr. Abode joined them. "Let them come. The desert is vast. We can handle a few rumor chasers. The important thing is that we remain focused on verifying this find." But the rumor's spread was unstoppable. Within 48 hours, speculation lit up on social media, with hashtags referencing the betrayal scroll. Prominent scholars weighed in on news channels, discrediting it as likely a forgery. Some fundamentalist groups condemned it as the devil's work. In certain corners of the internet, Gnostic enthusiasts hailed it as the truth about a centuries-long church cover-up. Miriam bristled at the online misinformation. She wanted to release a cautious statement about the discovery, clarifying that authenticity was still unproven, but Father Benedict advised waiting until they had more tangible results. "We can't risk fueling the frenzy without conclusive data," he reasoned. On the third night, a commotion arose outside the outpost. Miriam and Benedict dashed out to find two men in heated argument with the guard. One man, in particular, wore the expression of a zealot. He was brandishing a battered smartphone, shouting in broken Hebrew that the Gnostics must rise again. "Who are you?" Miriam demanded, stepping forward. Father Benedict stood at her side, calm but vigilant. "I am Joshua ben Avi," he declared. "I speak for the Circle of Serapis. We demand the parchment. It is ours by right. We have financed the research that led to its discovery." He was obviously lying. There was no record of anyone funding the Bedouin find, but his conviction was unshakable. Father Benedict tried to reason with him. "This parchment is under legal protection. You cannot simply take it." Joshua's eyes gleamed. "The Church has suppressed the truth for centuries. We will no longer stand by while you manipulate souls. Give us the parchment, or we will expose the entire operation." Miriam's pulse raced. This was exactly what she feared, that the conspiracy was real and that these men would stop at nothing. Still, the guard managed to usher them away, and the men left with curses on their lips, but not before they made a final threat. "We have allies all over the world. Even your precious AI tools will be turned against you. The truth will prevail." Afterwards, Father Benedict slumped against the outpost's wall, weariness etched on his features. Miriam joined him. He sighed. "Now we know for sure. This is bigger than just a stray rumor. If the Circle of Serapis is truly global and harnessing modern technology, they could produce documents that appear ancient, physically or digitally, and flood the academic sphere with contradictory claims." Miriam nodded. "We have to finalize our tests as quickly as possible. If we can show unequivocal evidence of forgery or authenticity, it'll help quell the speculation. Half-truths thrive in uncertainty." Still, a knot of doubt twisted in her gut. What if the text was real? What if it forced a re-evaluation of the entire Christian narrative? She remembered how fragile the historical records were from that era. A single new scroll could upend centuries of assumptions. And if it was discovered that John the Baptist had felt betrayed, that he or his followers believed he was the true Messiah, the ramifications would be cataclysmic for mainstream theology. She also knew that forging such a document would not be impossible, especially for a group wealthy enough to purchase genuine fragments of ancient papyrus, matching inks and advanced AI algorithms to refine the text. Every time she leaned toward believing it might be authentic, the specter of a cunning forgery reared its head. 4 days later, the carbon dating results arrived from Jerusalem. Miriam huddled around her laptop with Father Benedict, Dr. Aboud, and a couple of trusted researchers. Her eyes scanned the data, heartbeat pounding. The numbers on the screen were unequivocal. The parchment itself dated to the late 1st century or early 2nd century CE, with a 95% confidence interval. A stunned silence fell over the group. "That means the material is genuinely ancient," Dr. Aboud said slowly. "But that doesn't fully guarantee the writing is from that period. It could be an ancient parchment that was blank or partially erased and reused by forgers. We need the ink analysis." Miriam nodded, mind racing. "Right. The lab is working on that next. But if the ink also checks out as authentic to the time, this is huge. A text from that era referencing a doctrinal schism between John and Jesus." She trailed off, overwhelmed by the implications. Father Benedict placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We proceed carefully," he said. "Truth demands patience." That evening, they received a second call from the lab regarding the ink. Preliminary spectroscopic tests suggested the composition was consistent with iron gall ink from the late 1st century. There was no immediate sign of modern contaminants. The outpost was electric with excitement and dread. Once the final confirmation arrived, it became nearly impossible to deny. The text was very likely composed in the late 1st or early 2nd century. Whoever wrote it was close enough in time to the events to either preserve an early tradition or, conversely, produce an extremely early heretical or alternative account. Miriam felt lightheaded. If this is authentic, we're staring at a text that redefines the relationship between John the Baptist and Jesus, maybe the entire foundation of early Christian belief. We have to be absolutely sure. Father Benedict, though shaken, managed to nod. It might be a sectarian text from a community that revered John as the Messiah. We know from history that different groups had differing Christologies in the 1st and 2nd century. But this is the first direct textual evidence I've seen that John himself felt betrayed by Jesus. Dr. Aboud said quietly, "This is going to split the scholarly world, and the faithful too." They were too rattled to celebrate, or to lament, or to do much of anything except sit in silence and contemplate the magnitude of their discovery. In that silence, the phone buzzed once again. Miriam answered with trembling hands. It was the lab director in Jerusalem. "Dr. Levy," he said, voice filled with urgency. "We analyzed further and found microscopic traces of a synthetic compound in the margins. The writing area appears authentic, but the edges have been treated with something reminiscent of a modern polymer. We need more time to figure out exactly what this means. The center text might be ancient, but there could have been modern alterations or expansions. Possibly someone finished an incomplete text or supplemented it with new lines. You must be on high alert." A chill raced down Miriam's spine. If part of the text was original and someone had cunningly expanded or reworked it, the result could be a partial forgery that could pass most tests. This meant the text could be a hybrid, genuine historical parchment with genuine ancient lines, interwoven with carefully crafted modern additions to push a sensational narrative. She relayed the information to the others. Father Benedict's eyes narrowed. "So the gist of it is, we might be dealing with a palimpsest or partially erased text that was repurposed in antiquity, or a modern group tampering with an authentic manuscript. Either scenario changes everything." A wave of exhaustion rolled over Miriam. So they were back to a swirl of questions. If indeed a modern group was behind the final iteration of the text, it would explain the infiltration by the Circle of Serapis, the threats, and the rumor of a second parchment. On the other hand, if the text was genuinely from an early sect of John's devotees who believed in his messiahship, they might be dealing with a real bombshell. The presence of the synthetic compound might be from conservation attempts decades ago. Some unscrupulous antiquities dealers used modern varnishes to preserve fragile manuscripts. They simply didn't know. They needed more data. That night, Father Benedict decided to say Mass in the outpost's small chapel, a bare room with a simple wooden cross. Miriam, who was Jewish by heritage but often joined him out of respect, slipped in quietly. The two had always shared a deep friendship built on mutual reverence for history and faith, even if their theological beliefs diverged. A handful of others joined. Soft candlelight flickered. Outside, the desert winds howled. Benedict's words resonated with an air of solemn calm, asking for wisdom and guidance. Miriam didn't pray in the same manner, but she felt the power of the moment. Here they were, perched on the edge of a revelation that could alter the faith of millions, if proven authentic. And she recognized that truth was not a threat to genuine faith, though it could shake institutions built over centuries. Afterwards, they shared a meager meal, flatbread, hummus, olives, and discussed next steps. They needed more advanced tests, more expert opinions, and absolute transparency. But with the threat from the Circle of Serapis looming, and the potential for infiltration or sabotage, they had to remain guarded. Before turning in, Father Benedict suggested they keep the parchment locked in a safe at the local government facility, where armed security could watch over it. Dr. Aboud pulled strings to make it happen. Together, they carefully transported the sealed container of the parchment to a secure location in the nearest town. In the car, Father Benedict quietly confided to Miriam, "I fear we're about to enter a global storm, and we don't even know who's controlling the narrative. With AI in the picture, they could be planning a far more sophisticated disinformation campaign than we can imagine. She swallowed hard, remembering how advanced large language models could forge texts with terrifying plausibility. Meanwhile, unscrupulous labs could artificially age or augment materials. As an archaeologist who had dedicated her life to unearthing genuine history, she felt almost powerless against these new technologies if they were wielded by malevolent forces. In the rearview mirror, the reflection of the desert night was a reminder of how many secrets remained buried under the sands, how easily truth could be manipulated by those with the will and the means. They arrived at the government facility, where stern-faced guards accepted the sealed container with official paperwork. Miriam and Father Benedict stepped back into the dusty air, hearts heavy. The parchment was now safer, but their quest for certainty had only just begun. With a final glance at the fortress-like building, they shared a look filled with shared resolve. Whatever the truth might be, they owed it to history and to faith to bring it to light, despite the swirling threats from enemies both known and unknown. They returned to the outpost in silence. Above them, the stars glinted in the moonlit sky, each shining pinprick a reminder of how small they were against the vast tapestry of time. Yet, in their hands lay a potential key to the earliest days of Christianity and the power to alter centuries of belief. Neither said a word, but both understood. From here on, nothing would be simple. The desert had given them a revelation, and now they had to confront the firestorm that would inevitably follow.